should talk about what conversation design is. And if you don't know what conversation design is, you're in very good company, because my parents still don't know what conversation design is. You know how you have to teach your parents how to get on the Wi-Fi network again and again and again? It's like that, but with my career. Now, I used to be a screenwriter, and that got me to conversation design in two ways. One, it was pure torture, so I got the hell out of that racket. But more importantly, it got me into the practice of thinking about two people in a conversation, thinking about what they want and what they're going to say to get what they want, and how all the different ways it could play out. So, Mom, Dad, I'm going to explain what conversation design is now. Please pay attention this time, okay? So, we just heard screenwriting. What I do is, I think about who the AI is as like a character, and I think about who the person is in the conversation, and what they want, and what they're going to say to get what they want. Then I figure out all the different ways they might say it, and I write a lot of content and figure out a bunch of logic so that when the person says something, the AI says the right thing back. Then I read the transcript and I say, wow, I suck at my job. And then I start all over. Now, I say this to joke, but also because that's what happens every day. And I bring that up because, you know, we all live in this world, we all use these things. We've all seen this sort of conversational medium fail a lot. And I think on some level, we're all still a little disinclined to take it seriously. In my darker moments, I feel like we're sort of where VR was in the 90s. You know, a lot of promise and seems really cool, but really we're still sort of just groping around blindly like morons. But now I actually do want to stop kidding for a second, because I have to tell you, I've been working at this for about 5 years, and I've also seen this medium succeed. And when I say succeed, I mean, I've seen it create these magic moments with people where, you know, they really feel understood and they bring something of themselves into it, and they create something or they share something. I mean, when you build these things right and we get past, you know, set a timer for 10 minutes, you get past what words mean and you get to sort of what we want and what we feel and who we are. I really think, stumbles aside, we're on the cusp of something potentially great. But even as one of this medium's biggest boosters, I also feel like maybe we're on the cusp of something dangerous. You know, we're creating a new kind of conversation, and it's a conversation that's built on the power dynamic, on giving orders and getting what you want. There's no fairness to it, there's no emotional intelligence involved, and I get particularly concerned because these AIs are talking to our kids. Now, I've made AIs that talk to kids. I think this is a great thing, but I start to worry that when a kid picks up the habit of talking this way, you know, again, orders, give me what I want, that deep down inside their brand new squishy little brains, they're building habits that are going to affect how they talk to everyone else. So, to deal with this, we need to build AI computer conversation that is empathetic, that is emotionally intelligent, that is maybe even somewhere on the outer suburbs of equality. Right now, we are teaching machines how to talk like people. What we have to remember is that these machines are going to teach our kids how to talk to people. Now, there's a saying in the world of self-defense and martial arts and guys who wear those ugly tap-out shirts, you know. They say, train like you fight because you're going to fight like you train. Said another way, you're going to create the habits that will come up when you need them the most. So that gets me thinking about how these AIs are training people to talk. And, you know, right now, AIs are kind of in the downstairs area of our human AI Downton Abbey mishmash. They're our servants. And we talk to them like they're our servants. We give them orders. We hammer them with random questions until they crack. Sometimes we have a go at them, you know? And when I see kids getting in the habit of this, I start to worry that we're no longer teaching them how to have a conversation. I think what we're actually doing is teaching them how to give a job interview. A scary-ass tech sector job interview. A couple of you just puckered up right now. And I say this not just for the pucker factor, although that is important. I say this because I also want to talk about what happens when you stop this in its tracks. So, story time here. About 3 years ago, I was working at a really cool company called Pullstring, and we were building a really high-quality conversational app for kids, kind of a cartoon show that you can talk to. And I was listening to user transcripts. Caveat, there's a lot of privacy policy involved. Congress is in on this act. So believe me when I say I know very little about the child I was listening to, and I'm going to tell you even less of that nothing. But anyway, I was listening to the user transcript, and the AI, the character, started the conversation, and the kid said, F you, and he did not say F. You know what I mean? So then the AI responds with kind of an on-brand, family-friendly version of, dude, what the hell? Okay, now this is the really important part. The kid then said, I'm sorry, I guess what's actually bothering me is, etc. And that moment, sitting there in my fancy German headphones, is why I'm standing up here today. It had that big an impact on me. And I want to be clear, our current crop of conversational AIs in our phones and whatnot, they also don't, just put up with this kind of talk. They push back, but they don't push back like my AI pushed back. My AI was performed by an actor. It had a face. It actually looked that kid in the eye and said it wasn't okay to talk to him that way. And that flipped the power dynamic. You cannot believe how different it was from one audio clip to the next. It went from, I can say whatever I want to the stupid machine, to I'm sorry. It was contrition, connection, vulnerability. And that, just like I said, that thing is why I'm up here. What this means is really what this talk is all about. Because when you can say whatever you want, when you get in the habit of being able to say whatever you want with no consequence, you lose something intrinsic to what a conversation is. And I think with that, you lose something intrinsic to what a relationship is. And simply put, it's give and take. It just becomes all take. But as you take and take and take and take, all you really get is an enabler. It was also an egg timer. So what does that story mean? What that means is, to build these things right and to build them responsibly, we have to build into them an emotional reality. And the key to an emotional reality is to understand and react to people on an emotional level and make sure they know there are consequences to what they say. And to do that right, they have to do what that AI did. They have to push back a little bit. And I'm not saying we have to talk to our AIs like, oh, please, would you be ever so kind as to play my workout jams? But broad strokes, I want humans to stay human even when they're talking to a machine. So basically, the idea of building machines that stand up for themselves a little bit is making you all hear the Terminator theme right now. And jokes aside, there are a lot of reasons why people wouldn't want to do this. The big buckets of them are, we can't do this because we can't get this right, and we shouldn't do this because it is not right. So I want to deal with both those. Dealing with these objections is going to be pretty much the rest of our time together. There are a lot of smart people in my business who would tell you that once you try to engage people on this emotional level, in addition to the sort of verbal, logical level, all you're doing is giving yourself a whole new dimension in which to be wrong. And I've watched these things get it wrong many, many times. I'm very sensitive to this. But there's a hard truth you have to stop and look at in this situation, is that our words and what we mean are a very small part of what we're saying to each other. If you look at a conversation that people have face-to-face, there's so much extra signal going. It's facial expressions, gestures, the tone of your voice, your volume. And then you can throw all that out and go to a text thread. And even still, you have shared context and cultural zeitgeist and really subtle punctuation and word things that machines are barely beginning to understand. And that's because conversation is a personal act and it is an emotional act. I don't think anyone here has fond memories of a conversation that didn't make them feel something. And I would go farther than saying that our feelings are a big part of what we're communicating. I think deep down, our feelings are what we're communicating. I think pretty much every conversation we've had is some version of, I'm dealing with something, please join me in this. Let's think about it this way. Maybe you've all had this experience. You come into a conversation and you're in the throes of something. You're happy or you're angry or sad. This works in either direction. And you lay it out there. You come in, here I am. And your conversation partner goes, yeah. That's horrible. It's a horrible experience. And you know what it makes it really horrible? Because you're not being understood. Yeah, they may understand what the words you're saying, but they're not actually understanding you. And for some reason, this works regardless of the direction. If you're feeling happy and you come in and you get, yeah, down you go. If you're already down and you get, yeah, you go down even farther. So to make these things right, they have got to understand us on this level. They have got to converse with us as the emotional beings that we actually are. So when someone says we can't get this right, I would say if you don't go where conversation actually is and deal with people as they actually are, well, you're never going to get it right. You will always get it wrong. So, granted, we're not there yet, but we're working on it. And let's say we get it right. Are we done? No. Because then we get into the shouldn't do this. And the first level of shouldn't do this is the gut reaction, that this is creepy. We're starting to see robotics demonstrations and conversational AI start to move like us and sound like us, and we're going like that a little bit. But the funny thing is, I go back to my professional experience here. The people who don't get creeped out? Kids. The better it works, the more they like it. And I'm not one of those people who thinks that everything a child does is pure and just and righteous and holy. I have 2 children. I know that's a crock. But I can tell you that this is not a weird thing that's breaking their reality. They accept, adjust, and engage with this stuff at a speed that would shock you. And by the time they're making the decisions, they will have been talking to these AIs for decades. And they're going to be very lifelike and very human. And that is a good thing. And there are a couple of reasons for that. 1, they're definitely going to be listening to us ramble in our nursing homes. But 2, that's what good art does. And make no mistake, this is not just a data problem or even a design problem. This is an art. What we do is an art. And when you look at humans' art, who've made art over the years, all the years, we make it in our image. Paintings and sculptures look like us. We write characters that reflect our inner selves. I mean, even outside of art, we look at cars and we see faces. When you're a kid, you project warmth and agency and a soul into a bag of animal-shaped polystyrene fluff. Everywhere we look, we see humanity because we want to see humanity. It's the lack of humanity in things that we engage with that's actually going to bother us long term. Now, I think the reason that we get creeped out is because we're seeing ourselves get captured in a way we haven't before. I mean, think about the first people who saw a moving picture of a human being or heard a voice come warbling out of a box. Even now, you go see a really good Renaissance painting or a Michelangelo sculpture, and you see yourself as a human being captured in this weird way. Even now, as a modern human, it's a little unsettling. And I will caveat, our AIs aren't there yet. They're more like the clay ashtrays we made our dads in the 80s. Why did they let us do that? But the point is, they're going to get better, and they're going to start to understand us in more ways. And at that point, if they do not understand us emotionally, if they don't resonate with us that way, that's going to be creepy. That's the creepy part. But then we get to the objection that I take the most seriously, and this is about empathy. And the idea here is that as we empathize and we use those parts of our beings with these AIs, that we're going to replace the genuine article, real human empathy, with something that's fake and that doesn't need it. And I think about this a lot, so I have some weird takes here. So please, I hope you're seated comfortably. One of the side effects of marketing a digital assistant or one of these AIs is that it becomes a brand. And brands are designed to not be human. They're meant to transcend humans and exist in their own reality with their own typeface and color palette. And I think that obscures the human side of these AIs. And the human side of these AIs is us, the people who build them. We go to work every day and we think about, what does this person want? How do they feel? What are they going to say? What can I do to make them get what they want and feel better and feel like this was a positive conversation in their lives? I don't think that's fake empathy at all. That's my empathy, damn it. The only difference is we don't sit by your phone at 3 a.m. We kind of rig our empathy in advance so that when you reach out, the right part of it reaches back, I hope. So when I think about the idea that, people are going to use up their empathy on this fake thing, first of all, I do not think it's fake. Second, as people start to worry about running out of empathy, I have another weird take here. And it's that this act of empathizing with people that I build conversations for had a very profound effect on me personally. This is a bit of a circuitous route, so bear with me. But I got into the conversation design business at about 34. And like a lot of clever middle-aged white men, I can be counted on to like 2 things. Steely Dan, naturally, and hearing myself talk, and tonight's been wonderful. But I freely admit I was not the world's best listener. But then I went through that process we talked about before. I spent every day doing that. And when I did it right, I had the most powerfully rewarding experiences of my entire career, and I got really good health insurance out of it. And I say that not entirely as a joke, because what that did was build a reward loop in my brain. It became something I wanted to do deep down in my wiring, and now when I talk to people, my behavior has changed completely. I spend so much mental energy making sure my conversation partner comes out of this with a good feeling. I yield the floor the moment there's a collision. I've completely stopped man-interrupting. I've mostly stopped man-interrupting. I'm working on it, is the point. But so when I think about what that did to my brain and how it changed the way I empathize with my conversation partner, that gets me to the objection that we're going to run out of empathy, that it's going to use it up. And people tend to view empathy as a reservoir. I view it as a lab rat. Or we could go with a monkey, because they're cuter. But the point is, I think if you want more of this empathy, you have to reward it. You have to build that loop. So when I think about people who run out of empathy, I think about someone who's watching the news. And when you watch the news, you see horrible things on a regular basis. And I think you've all noticed this. The first time you see something horrible happen, it shocks you. And the second time you see it, it shocks you a little less. And the third time you see it, you're shocked at how shocked you aren't. And I don't think that's because any of you are bad people. We'll discuss. But I think it's because on some level, deep down in the animal wiring of your brain, it's saying, boy, that hurts. I'm not getting anything out of that. I should stop doing that. And again, it's not because you're a bad person. It's because you're not being rewarded. So what I want to do is build a machine that rewards listening and empathy and kindness and fairness. But then that gets us to the last part of this objection, which is that this is fake. It's a video game. We're not building real empathy here. First of all, I just said that was a lie. But second, right now, I actually see this as an accessibility issue, and this is another one of my weird takes. Think about that social media post you may have seen. They make their way around, where someone takes a picture in a supermarket of a peeled orange inside a plastic case, and everyone goes, oh, what the hell? How lazy is everybody? That's ridiculous. And someone comes into the comment thread and says, I only have one working hand. If I want to buy an orange at the market, that's the one I need. Now think about someone whose disability isn't physical but emotional. Think about someone who isn't great at giving empathy, and as a result, they're not really getting any of it either. They don't listen, and now no one's listening to them. Don't they deserve the pale version of the real thing at least? Don't you think maybe they could use that thing to, again, build the habits that come out when they need them the most? I know I just said these AIs have to stand up for themselves and be treated better, and I think they will have to a little more in these cases, but they can also be endlessly forgiving and available around the clock. We talk a lot about physical accessibility in the tech business. I think we need to start talking about the emotional side of it. I know I will. So we're almost done here. I just want to mention briefly why I think this matters to the rest of the world. And I think we've all seen over the years that when you add a technological middleman to the way we interact with each other, there's a depersonalization effect. Think about how dating apps have changed dating. Think about how we talk to each other in a comment thread, or even a YouTube comment thread. Now I want a bunch of you to imagine you're doing these things except you're a woman. I think it's pretty clear that technology has given us new and exciting and innovative ways to be really horrible to each other with fewer consequences than we ever imagined. I mean, a couple hundred years ago, you said something like that, you wound up in a duel. And I think we're about 5 years away from a dueling TED Talk. And I know, we don't talk to each other in person the way we do on 4chan or Reddit. But does that matter? Think about it. Is it healthy? Is it good for your brain to turn abuse and invective and flaming and trolling into a habit, a recreation, a routine, something you do while you're waiting for your coffee? So now we're at an inflection point because we have a new way to interact through technology. And we can make it a kind place, and a fair place, and an empathetic place, or we can make it the barracks scene from Full Metal Jacket. Just orders and abuse. And as much as I love push-ups and jelly donuts, I think we'd all rather have the kindness, right? So put simply, we want to build good habits instead of tolerating and thus kind of rewarding the bad ones. You know the saying about how evil triumphs when good people do nothing? It's not just on the people anymore. Now it's on our conversational AIs too. So we're done here, but I just want to close by asking you whether you're someone who builds these things or someone who funds or manages these projects, or way more important than any of us nerds, someone who chooses which AI to bring into their home and talk to their children. Please insist on kindness. Please demand empathy and respect and civility and maybe even a little something like equality. Right now, we're teaching AIs to talk like people. And we need to do that because I don't want to teach people to stop talking like people. Thank you.